So this is lecture number 9. And lecture number 8 took us all the way through World War II, right? So lecture 9 here is the post-war period. The onset of what comes to be known as the Cold War. So this lecture will sort of take us through the late 1940s and then part of the 1950s. Based on everything we talked about in World War II, would you say that black people made progress during World War II?
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, think of all the ways in which they made progress. The inclusion in unions, the Tuskegee Airmen, the first ever black nurses, more black people in politics. There was a lot of progress made during the Double V campaign in World War II. But what we're going to see here is that the movement stalls after World War II. That's the title there, A Movement Stalled. And the reason for that is anti-communism. Because who back in the 1930s had been black people's best white allies? Communists. And now, in this thing called the Red Scare, America was intensely afraid of communism. And so, you see, if you didn't want black people to have their rights, what do you scream anytime somebody says racial equality?
Communism.
Communism. Right. Communism. Racial equality, you would say, is part of a communist plot. And that is what we'll see play out here. So, the context for all this lecture, really the context for the rest of the course, is the Cold War. The Cold War, this long struggle between the United States and the Soviet Union. The Cold War went on for the better part of 50 years. And we call it the Cold War because what did the US and the Soviet Union never do?
They never fought each other.
Exactly. They never directly shoot at each other, which would be called a hot war, you know? Instead, they faced off against each other and competed for global domination. And for our purposes here in this class, I think we can get what we need to out of the Cold War if you think of it like this. It's a struggle between communism and capitalism. And the United States is like the captain of the capitalist team of nations. And the Soviet Union, then, is like the capital of the communist team of nations. And during the Cold War, what both the US and the Soviet Union wanted was for the rest of the countries around the world to join their team. Right? So the United States wants the whole world to be capitalist. The Soviet Union wants the whole world to be communist. They're competing for the allegiance and the loyalty of countries around the world. And in that competition, which of these two countries do you think said of themselves, we're the ones that represent freedom?
Each other.
What do you mean?
I said both.
You got it. They both claimed to be the one that really represented freedom. The United States says, we represent freedom. And the Soviet Union says they're full of crap. We represent freedom. Well, in the 1950s and 1960s, the colonial world broke down. Remember how weeks ago we talked about how Europeans had conquered Africa back in the late 1800s? Well, now, African nations were getting their independence. So when you look across the map there and you see the year, that is the year that that country got their independence. And you'll see that there's a big wave of African independence in the late 50s and very early 60s, right? So By the way, it's not just Africa getting their independence. Asia was getting its independence, getting rid of Europeans. And as these go from being European colonies to free African countries, both the US and the Soviet Union wanted these countries to join their team. The US wants them to be capitalist. And the US says to them, we represent freedom. Join our team. And what do the Soviets tell these people about the United States?
Imperialist. That United States is an imperialist country.
What else? Because, yeah, that.
That you won't be free.
Because why? What do we know about the United States back in the United States? Right. They tell these African countries, the United States doesn't like people who look like you. Look at what the United States does to people of African descent inside the United States of America. They show them pictures of American lynchings and American race riots. And they say the United States does not stand for freedom, not for people who look like you. The Soviet Union believes that all human beings are equal. So you see, what starts to happen now is that the treatment of black people inside the US becomes an international issue for the first time. It's never been like this before. Now, it doesn't happen all at once, right? But this develops through the 50s and 60s, where the United States' treatment of black people now hurts the United States around the world. And that's really a new phenomenon. It wasn't like that before World War II. So it's just like a little point that I'm making here, but I'm then going to come back to it over and over the last weeks of our class, because it shifts everything. All right, so keep that in mind as we go forward. That's the context against which black people here in the US are trying to get full acceptance as Americans. Like we said in the last lecture, remember those veterans? They came home determined to change things. And yet, when they came home, the United States seemed in many ways to be the same oppressive country. Still got the Klan to worry about. Still got the police to worry about. And notice, this painting here is done by a black artist who was also a veteran right after the war. And notice the way he's got it. The Klansmen and the police officers sort of morph into each other, right? So from black people's perspective, it's sort of hard to tell the one from the other. So black people came back to a country that still seemed determined to oppress them. But right after World War II, America's pastime began to integrate. America's pastime was baseball. And you know, like baseball is still around today. Baseball is still a sport. But we have no sense of just how popular baseball was in the 40s and 50s. Baseball was more popular than probably all American sports combined. Now, baseball was it. Kids grew up dreaming of playing baseball. They played baseball in the street and in their little cow fields. And baseball, like America, was segregated. Right? Major League Baseball was all white. Black people who played baseball played where?
The black leagues.
Right. In the Negro leagues, the segregated baseball leagues around the country. Well, in 1946, this fella here, his name was Branch Rickey. And Branch Rickey was the general manager of the Brooklyn Dodgers. And Branch Rickey decided to do something that no major league team had tried to do. Sign a black player. Remember, there's no law against having a black player, right? It's just practice. It's just the way the US works. So Branch Rickey signed Jackie Robinson, who remember is a veteran, right, from that tank battalion, in 1945. Branch Rickey did this more than any other reason because he wanted to win. Branch Rickey was something of a liberal himself. You know, he's not like a nasty kind of racist in any kind of way. But the biggest reason he did this, because he wanted the Dodgers to win. And Branch Rickey believed that if the Dodgers reached into this talented pool of players and picked someone before any other major league team did, what does that do for the Dodgers?
They're gonna lose.
What's that?
They're gonna lose. They're gonna win.
What?
It
Well,
gives
If
a- it-
he doesn't sign,
I guess not necessarily either, but what it guarantees is they have an advantage.
that's-
Right? Because here are all these talented baseball players, and it's like all of Major League Baseball saying, no, don't pick any of them. So if you're the first team to say, all right, well, watch this, we'll pick one of those
There's a
guys.
trend.
Exactly, then you've got an advantage over every other team. And Rickey selected Jackie Robinson. Now, Jackie Robinson was not considered the best player in the Negro Leagues. He was considered one of the best, but you could have picked other talented black players. You see, talent wasn't the only thing he was thinking about. He was also thinking about picking a player who could handle what was going to happen. Right? Because there are going to be protests, there's going to be nastiness, there are going to be terrible things shouted at him, other players are going to do terrible things to him, he's going to be threatened. And through all of this, the player who gets into Major League Baseball has to keep his cool. If a white player tries to pick a fight with him, can he fight? No. Because if he fights, everybody's going to say it's whose fault? It's the black guy's fault. Right. So you needed somebody who was talented, yeah, but also somebody who was sort of had the right sort of inner strength to make this work. Jackie Robinson spent the 1946 season in the minor leagues. I don't know if you know anything about how baseball works, but you know, there's a farm system below the major league team. And Jackie Robinson was busy crushing the competition in the all-white minor leagues. And then, in 1947, Jackie Robinson went to Brooklyn to start the season with the Brooklyn Dodgers. When he gets to Brooklyn, who are all his teammates?
White.
They're all white, right. And a group of them started a movement threatening to quit if Jackie Robinson stayed on the team. They got most of the white players to say, we'll quit if he stays on the team. And then they went to Branch Rickey, the general manager, and they said, hey, we're all together on this. We're all going to quit if Jackie Robinson stays. And Branch Rickey said, well, do what you have to do. Go ahead and quit. How about that? Branch Rickey calls their bluff because he didn't think they really meant it. He thought they wanted to play baseball, you know? And he's like, well, if it means that much to you, go ahead and quit. And none of them quit. They all stayed because they want to play baseball. Some of his own teammates started the season refusing to speak to their teammate, Jackie Robinson, and a couple of them even threatened to kill him. These are who?
His teammates.
His teammates. Right. But then, the season started. And Jackie Robinson could play baseball. And Jackie Robinson started hitting home runs and stealing bases and making incredible plays in the field. And bit by bit, his teammates start to support him. Because what do they want to do even more than hate Jackie Robinson? They want to win. Right. And so as the season went on, Jackie Robinson's teammates, not all of them, but most of them, came around. problem then was on the road, right? The problem is when the team has to travel. And when the team goes on the road, that's when the terrible stuff started. On the field, Jackie Robinson had terrible things shouted at him, all kinds of hateful, racist things, sometimes from fans, sometimes from opposing players and managers. He had things thrown at him from the stands, batteries, pieces of glass. People are throwing stuff at him on the field. He had his life threatened hundreds of times. The Dodgers kept a whole file cabinet full of the threats that had been made against Jackie Robinson, because people didn't know where to send it to, right? So they just send it to the Brooklyn Dodgers, and the Dodgers were like, we're not going to show this to Jackie Robinson, we'll just stick it in the file. And they had a whole file full of threats made against Jackie Robinson. When the team traveled, they would stop at a restaurant, and the restaurant would say, we don't serve Negroes. And the whole team would go in to eat, and they'd say, oh, we'll bring you something back when we're done, Jackie. And he would sit on the bus. They would stay in hotels, and hotels would say, we don't let Negroes stay here. And Jackie Robinson would have to go stay at somebody's house in a black neighborhood. But by the end of the season, his own teammates now said things like, well, we're not going to eat at this restaurant. We'll find a restaurant where Jackie can eat. We're not going to stay at this hotel unless Jackie Robinson can stay at this hotel. And are these guys doing this because they're now crusaders for racial justice? Why are they doing it?
That's their teammate.
Because he's their teammate, and they want to win. Right. And it shows you why they didn't want to let black people be on teams with white people. Because it breaks down racism. It really does. There's this incredible moment during the season, it's about halfway through the season, where there was a Southerner who was one of the stars of the Brooklyn Dodgers, a white Southerner. And they're on the road, and fans are booing Jackie Robinson, and this white Southerner walks out to where Jackie Robinson is on the field, fans are booing, game hasn't started. He just walks out and puts his arm around Jackie Robinson. And just hangs out there and sort of talks to Jackie for a minute. Of course, nobody can hear what they're talking about, you know? But he just puts his arm around him, stands there with him. Fans are like, what is he doing? He can't do that. And here they are at the end of the season. Those teammates who threatened to quit if he was on the team, now embracing him like he's just another ball player. And Jackie Robinson won Rookie of the Year. The best rookie in all of baseball. And who are the only people voting? White sports writers, right? Which means he wasn't just the best. He was so far and away the best that you couldn't deny it. And the Dodgers went to the World Series. The Dodgers went to the World Series. They lost. Sort of the only bummer in the storyline. But they made it to the World Series. And what do you think some other team is ready to do next season?
Get a black player.
Right. The next team to do it was the Cleveland Indians, who brought Larry Doby up for the 1950 season. Sorry, the 1948 season. And by the end of that season, other major league teams had signed black players. Within 5 years of Jackie Robinson, almost every team in baseball had a black player. Within 5 years. Segregation in baseball was crumbling with amazing speed. And after almost every team had one black player,